Wonder Egg Priority is a show that I may be biased for, considering I own the physical collector's edition. From this purchase, I got this art book, which I was very excited for because of the interviews inside. There are interviews from the director, character designer, and writer, detailing thought processes behind the characters, story, and production. There's even this nice note from Shinji Nojima hoping that he can get an opportunity to write a continuation. There's a lot to come over, but what I was surprised to see was the last interview with the people behind the music. I'll be brave enough to say this, but I like the music of Wonder Egg Priority, and it also helped me to discover someone who I've been really vibing out to these days, Didi Mouse. The music really stood out to me on a first watch, having EDM and electronic instruments as a backing. Reading about their work here gave me a newfound appreciation to that music and how it's used in the overall storytelling of Wonder Egg. For some background, the show's music started with Mito, the bassist of Clanbon. He had been in talks with music producer Yamauchi for 3 to 4 years in hopes of doing something interesting in terms of background music. And when discussion of a collaborative effort came about, he suggested Didi Mouse. Didi Mouse is known in the EDM scene, but had made the album Farewell Holiday, which Mito was a big fan of, feeling like it was similar to a film score. It turns out that Wakabayashi was also a fan when the project started getting more legs, this time citing a song from a later album, A Journey to Freedom, while he was location scouting. The differences in those albums give a good picture of the scope of Wonder Egg Priority's soundtrack. Mito was impressed by the range of Didi's sound using orchestrated music alongside pop and dance, and I think certain tracks really embody that feeling. Let's take a song from Farewell Holiday. Bedtime Flight starts with orchestration that feels like a chase scene due to its quick rhythm and repeated notes. There are constant violins as tubas and trumpets join for ecstatic bursts, giving the song a light feeling of looming danger. There's a consistent through line for the mood of the song, but later on we get this section. A cartoonish charm is mixed in, and its orchestral texture shifts, but that feeling of a chase is still present. It may have gotten a whole lot sillier, but that's also owing to its storied nature, how a chase can be cartoonish and outlandish, and the bombastic orchestra is now complicated and accentuated. And actually, this song reminds me of track number 5 in OST 1, with a constant repeated chord and explosions of notes for tension. The song even similarly adds additional electronic elements as it keeps going to further the moment. This is used during a chase scene, and follows the same patterns that Bedtime Flight does in its conventions, which happens to be what the scene itself is about. This explosion of intensity and velocity that never stops until they get away. Mito found an orchestral, film-like quality to Didi's music, and it paid off in Wonder Egg Priority's soundtrack, having certain songs be bombastic and ornate, but also keeping the threads of EDM, creating this alluring mixture to make scenes stand out. On the other hand, Wakabayashi referred to Same Crescent Song from A Journey to Freedom. The orchestral elements are dropped here for a mostly electronic experience, and it's a relatively calm and peaceful tune. Its title is Same Crescent Song, and there's this consistent rhythm and bass line playing into a theme of repetition. There are sections where the song does change, but it doesn't come off as drastically different. Its texture and atmosphere is very consistent. It's what the song is going for, and it creates comfort and sameness. The first track that Didi composed for Wonder Egg was Brand New World, which Wakabayashi requested to be similar to Same Crescent Song. When Didi presented a similar track, Wakabayashi said it lacked a sense of liberation, as he didn't want a one-to-one copy but freedom and vibrancy. The result is the change from the static nature of Same Crescent Song to the more jumpy and unpredictable beat changes. Both songs start the same. With a repeated single note before a payoff. However, Brand New World has a much more flashy payoff, where the consistency of its beginning isn't carried over seamlessly, and it unabashedly devolves into explosions of different sounds, rhythms, and melodies. It, as much as it can, brings you to a brand new world, by changing the rhythm or adding extra effects and instruments at every turn it can. In the context of the show, this plays at the end of episode 1, when Ai is firmly introduced to this brand new world, and comes to terms with the possibilities it offers. It's an oddly upbeat tune for what we had just witnessed, but it also highlights a relevant part of the show, which is hope. For me, the show's exploration of darker subject matter isn't done excessively, but instead the show wants to focus on how people can still move forward in spite of those darker subjects. Brand New World being called the key track to the series, full of hope, wonder, and liberation, makes sense in that way. I also like the metatextual elements of the song as it shows Didi's process and growth, a validation of who he is now. I think what strengthens the nature of the soundtrack and how Didi's sound can shift from ornate instrumentals with odd and eerie rhythms and motifs to the soft and bright tunes is that he didn't actually read much of the script. That seems counterintuitive, but Didi describes himself as someone who tunnel visions once he gets an image. He thought that if he read the screenplay he would get too clear an idea of what the characters are like, and instead only looked at character sheets. I can't say from a music production standpoint I can relate or critique this method, but I can say from a writer's standpoint, and even from an editing standpoint, I see where he's coming from. When I made my recent AMV, I didn't think I would expand the live action sections to encompass half of that AMV. I only planned for 2 sections. If I had too clear of an idea, I probably would have finished just those 2 parts and called it a day, but while editing I got inspired and was able to see beyond what I had planned. However, I'm not going in completely blind. I still have a good idea of what I wanted, just not the entire picture. And Didi attests to this, saying how his process is all about turning mental images into sounds. It's not something entirely clear, just something he has in mind, and he'll work from there. Just seeing the characters, Didi can get a good sense of who they are. He cites the way Ai covers her heterochromia, yet wears a sunflower hoodie as a key part in her character's complexity. It's all about the impressions from looking at the designs. It's hard to define a theme to the characters, but we can trace some of the songs that are synonymous to them, like this first one when Ai jumps off the roof for the kill. It's an incredibly upbeat song. The texture and feel is hopeful, cheery even. What we don't get in the show is the build up to that beat drop. The song starts here. We get these looping chords that feel as if the sound is chasing itself. Then some drums kick it up a notch. And the beat drops, with a violin motif stringing along the melody. That sense of recursion, as that one loop just keeps going, holding things together, signifies this idea of the constant. That I will be constantly fighting, constantly looking for answers, or constantly moving forward and trying to improve, which we see later on. The song then becomes dripping with hopeful undertones and a sense of progression due to the new instruments along with additional notes, rhythms, and melodies sprinkled in. It's to an extent an odd song for Ai if you only account for one side of her, but not for who she is shown to be, someone who might be a recluse but still cares for her friends and is rather joyous at times. I think the impressionist method helps enhance that part of her and even brings out and makes clear that Ai really isn't as dreary as her situation might make her be. This is one step in her constant days of looping and moping around that is different. This is a new start, a start with movement and progression, which is also fitting considering the song's title is translated as When Flowers Bloom. This is a moment when she blooms metaphorically, and literally as her pen blooms into this giant weapon, the blood blooms in this shot, as she blooms out of her hesitation and finds some way forward, to finding some resolution to her situation. If we trace this idea to other characters, we can get something similar, like with Rika. My impression of her character design gives me punk rock vibes. The jacket, jeans, even the fact that they have her, at least for this illustration, with her hand in her pocket, gives off a specific brashness to her demeanor. The pink highlight tells a different story, and that idea of duality is here again. Rika does have two sides of her, the side that ridicules the people around her, and the side that just really wants to see her dad and is in pain. We are introduced to her with this song. It's a bit mysterious, the tone is neutral, it's as if the song is trying to figure out what it wants to be. The melody is a bit staggered in its notes, it's a bit slow, but with enough changes in its rhythms and melodies to still draw you in, almost hypnotically. The instruments do a lot of the heavy lifting, with flourishes of bells and chimes. It's rather ethereal. I could see how that relates to Rika, since upon first inspection, she's someone we actually don't know a lot about. We see her with a box cutter, chastising her dead friend, and she gives off very hostile vibes, but it's not enough that we're entirely put off. Maybe her initial comments are a little too much, but it seems like from her body language, the smoothness when she touches Chiemi's hand, how her eyes are rather serious, how she isn't boasting about what she's saying in this private moment, the way she boasts when she's with other people, shows that there is more to her. It's similar to the song, bringing you in ever so slowly with intrigue, with something waiting to be found. The song's title, when translated, is Desire. A desire to find the truth, a desire to know what lies underneath, Rika being a person of desires, often talking about money and being given things, or a desire to be able to tell the truth. It's an interesting premise, and an interesting impression that one might get from looking at Rika. Of course, for clarification, it wasn't as if all of these tracks were made with just an impression of a character, as Didi clarifies. They got plenty of direction. Wakabayashi would give mental images and the sound director, Akiko Fujita, would put words to them, and she clearly explained what each scene was and what impression it was aiming for. They even had options to deliberately stray away from any mental pictures they got. I think the overall result from this creation process brings about a soundtrack as surprising and full of energy that matches Wonder Egg. There are orchestral tracks that bleed into electronic, forming a unison of feeling and storytelling, and electronic tracks that utilizes the variety in instruments, the freedom of rhythm and style, to create unique songs born from the impressions gleaned in the show. Sometimes these impressions might not be what is exactly outwardly told in the story, but even those loose interpretations can create dimensions to what is already there, making the music an interwoven subtext to the show. But that was only one part of the interviews, and I only really talked about Didi Mouse. There is one more person to this duo, and the soundtrack isn't entirely done without mentioning them. And that was the end of the video. I know I was alluding with that outro that there was going to be another part where I talk about Mito, the other half of the soundtrack, which I will do in part 2 mainly because I didn't want this video to be too long. I just wanted to have each part be digestible in a shorter length. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully, if you're a One Direct fan or not, that this is a different kind of discussion, one that isn't marred in how people perceive the show and how the discussions around the show are these things. I just want to share some positive things about a show that I still really like. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.